Good morning. Welcome to Contemporary Issues Adult Sunday School class. I'm Steve and you aren't. And thank you for being here today. So good to have you. We are pleased to have Christine Little with us today, one of our class members, going to present for the first time here in our class about the book called The Anxious Generation, about how iPhone and social media are changing the brains of young people and their personalities. And it's one of the top selling books for weeks now, isn't it, Ron?
Months now. Yeah.
Months now, yes. So really an important topic. So we are glad to have Christine here to do it. And I'll introduce her in just a minute. But first, welcome Zoomers. Please mute yourself in the lower left corner of your screen when you're not speaking. And we are recording this for future playback on YouTube for those who can't be here today. And any other announcements? I do want to welcome Carla and Mitch Hankins to our class today. Occasional visitors, haven't seen them for a while and hope you're doing good. Any other visitors back for a long time?
I'm not a visitor, but my daughter is.
Nice to have you here. Good. Great. Nice to have you here.
Yeah, it's so good to have you back.
Yes.
Yeah, I've been hiding out on Zoom.
Formally, yes. Nice to have you here,
It's
Ann.
nice to see you.
Very good. Okay.
And John, right?
Right.
And Lisa and John, they've been here before with us, I know. Nice to have you back. Yep. Sometime soon, we're going to outgrow this room and we will find another room. Figure if we have to knock out that wall or something, we'll do what we. Well, let me go ahead and start. So we've got plenty of time for Christine to present. And Christine also has that she will be glad to entertain questions and comments during the time, but we need to keep moving pretty quickly today to get through this first part of two-part to do on this interesting book, which has a lot going on. But let me introduce Christine first. She's from Indiana originally. Her father was a Methodist minister in Indiana, but you've been here since 1974. You said, and you taught for 20 years at Arapahoe High School, psychology, geology, and human behavior. Geography, yes, different than geology. And I asked Christine if I remembered correctly that she was there the day that the shooting happened at Arapahoe High School. She said not only was she there, it was in her class, the 5th hour class, and that whenever there's a similar thing across the country, it brings it up for her again. So, and she didn't mind me bringing that up. So quite interesting. And she's had a varied career. So we want to thank you for that, for your service and for presenting today. And so please welcome Christine Little.
Thank you. I'm used to speaking in front of 35 high school seniors, not some 40 highly educated, intelligent adults. So I ask for your patience and your understanding as we go through this. Steve and Ron had asked me to read this book and then present to you some of the main findings of Dr. Jonathan Haidt's book on the anxious generation. I found the book enlightening and also disturbing because I would say in the last 6 years of my teaching from 20 to 2016, I noticed an increasing attachment and even addiction of my young people to their phones. It got more and more difficult to keep their attention for the period. They would be sneaking their phones, in their laps and everything. And so the attention was affected and also their behavior. So when I retired, that was one of my main concerns about young people, and that's been 9 years, and it really hasn't gotten any better. So before I get started, though, I'd like to just explain the handout that I gave you. The first page deals with the main themes that are in the book. Now, Dr. Haidt initially wanted to do his book on how social media affects all of us. But once he took a look at the research of what was happening to our young people, specifically Generation Z, he decided to focus on that. But he does devote one chapter to how it affects all of us. And that's related to the fourth paragraph in the themes is from that chapter. And I want you to read it for next week. We could talk about it. Do you think he's correct? This is what is happening to our society, the effect of social media on all of us. On the back is an article on child's play that I'm going to address today. And then the second page is really for next week. It involves the recommendations that Jonathan Haidt proposes of what we can do now. Tech companies, governments, schools, parents, and even ourselves. But I wanted to give it to you this week. So if you have time, and I hope you do, to take a look at it so we can have a more meaningful discussion next week about what you think about his proposals. Are they realistic? Do you have any other suggestions? And then we also might address what we think social media is doing to all of us. I want to mention that social media there's many benefits to social media. This book addresses the negative effects of social media, but we don't deny that we know that I think I heard Ron and Steve talking about how they can communicate with friends in different countries and everywhere through social media. So there are benefits. But in this case, Dr. Haidt is talking about the impact that it has on Gen Z. So let's start with a little humor here.
Okay, hang on just a second and I'll hit share screen here, so.
Because there's not a lot of positive things to this lesson. Okay, here are his parents saying, "It's been so nice getting to interact with you these past 6 years. Here's your first device." So actually, that's not very funny because when the parents see that their child grabs a hold of that iPhone, they may lose contact with their child. Okay, let's go to the next one.
Christine, what age do kids get their first iPhone today or first
We should
device?
say smartphone, so we can be.
Smartphones, that's a good idea.
Okay.
And by the way, while you're saying that, my children do not hesitate to remind me that I am not very knowledgeable about social media. So I will do the best I can. I'm not familiar with the terminology. No, we're talking about children 11, 12, 13 evidently is the age, lower. 13 is the age for when they can sign up for Instagram and things like that. But many children find workarounds and they can do it much later. But you're right, it's younger. And I don't know, I mean, I have grandchildren their oldest is 8 now. They don't have an iPhone yet, but I think many parents, anyone know? I mean, anyone might make a comment?
I would say as young as first grade.
Really?
But that often is dependent on divorced family is where that occurs. A lot of them have smart watches, so the parents will say like, it's just a smart watch, like it's the same thing, kind of thing. But I would say 3rd and 4th grade is where we start to see a steady rise. And then by 6th grade, almost all of them do it.
Smartphones with the internet 24/7. Wow, okay.
My grandkids had those little iPads way before first grade. They were because it kept them entertained if they took them somewhere. So
Yeah,
they
yeah.
started at 3, 4 years old.
Yeah, but they're not on social media
No.
yet at that age. It's more of a little TV screen for the.
Kids that are in car line, and the minute that they're picked up from their parents, you can hear them say, "Can I have your phone?" Or iPad or whatever, and it's a 5-minute drive to their house, so, yeah.
That's gonna be a problem.
Yeah.
Okay, so Jonathan Haidt has written several books. I've listed them there. This book, The Anxious Generation, as he describes how the great rewiring of childhood is causing an epidemic of mental illness. Notice the word causing. This is the big deal. He's not saying it's a correlation or a relationship. He is saying from his research with experimental groups and control groups, he sees a cause and effect relationship between the use of social media and mental health problems in young people. There are 4 parts to his book. First, mental health trends in adolescence since 2010, and I'll tell you why he thinks that's an important date. The nature of childhood and how we messed up, and that's his terminology. harms that result from the new phone-based childhood, and what we must do now to reverse the damage in our families, schools, and societies. And that's what we're going to talk about next week. Okay, next slide here. Okay, Dr. Haidt focuses on Generation Z. Why does he do that? Well, this was the first generation in history to go through puberty with the iPhone, the 24/7 internet in the virtual world, this computer simulated environment populated by simultaneous users. Gen Z generally was born 1997 to 2012, current age 13 to 28. He focuses on that group because that is, he said, the first group that really, during the very formative years of their life, puberty, they were on that phone. And they were in this alternate universe that he says was exciting, addictive, unstable, and unsuitable for adolescents and for young children. Okay. Now, since we're talking about generation, I just thought I would bring up this so we know where Gen Z is with the rest of us. Now, I think we might have some Gen Xers, because I see we have someone's daughter here. Most of us are probably baby boomers. We probably have some in the silent generation. How many are in the silent generation? Wow, quite a few. And I know we have one. Jim is in the great generation. So, but you see Gen Z, and this is the group that we're going to be talking about. This is the focus right now. Okay. He talks about the internet arriving in two different ways. First, there was paratechnology with our computers and the internet. That didn't seem to have any negative effect on our mental health, young people's mental health. But the second wave seems to show a real change. When paratechnologies of social media was with the smartphone, which was introduced in 2007. Then in 2009 was the introduction of the things like and share and retweet. But the big change was in 2010 when there was a front-facing camera where you could take pictures of yourself and videos of yourself and send them out into the universe. So here you have Facebook starting in 2004, Instagram in 2010, and was bought by Facebook in 2012, Snapchat, 2011, TikTok, 2016, and there are, of course, many other platforms, but here are some of the main ones. Okay, so the way begins. Oh, let's see. First of all, he just said the generation became more anxious, depressed, self-harming, and suicidal. They were connected to the internet 24/7. Though this smartphone could run millions of apps, ping them continually throughout the day, urging them to check out what anyone was saying or doing.
Too much overload.
Over,
Is that the general idea?
yes, while the brain is still developing, is what he's saying. So I'm going to be showing you a number of charts. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them, but I want to show them to you to show the trends. The wave begins. So here in this first chart on the left, major depression among teens. The gray bar, vertical bar, represents 2010 to 2015. So notice.
Enlarge that while you're talking about them.
No, I'm sorry. You can't get it enough so you can see it clearly.
Well, what I'm going to do is have him maybe use the cursor, and then you can go online and look at these charts closer. I thought about that too, of the fact that you may not be able to see them that clearly. But this one here, the yellow line is the girls. And notice when the major depression among teens, at least one major depressive episode in the past year is this survey. Notice it begins to start an uptick in 2010. The boys are generally always not quite as impacted, but even the boys, there's 161% change from 2010, the girls 135% increase. On the right-hand side, emergency department visits for non-fatal self-harm, children 10 through 14. Again, the yellow represents the girls, 311% increase starting in 2010. So as Dr. Hyde is looking at it, he's saying, what happened in 2010? And he thinks maybe that front-facing camera might be one of the indicators that might cause this increase. The boys increased a little bit as well. Okay, now, Dr. Hyde emphasizes that this is not a United States problem. This is an international problem, especially among our English-speaking allies, our industrialized nations, and including Europe. This is happening worldwide with young people who have access to smartphone. So here I have a chart for our Canadian friend on Zoom, Canadian women and Canadian men. I'd like maybe Steve to do this yellow line here, 15 to 30. This is young people who report that they have excellent or good mental health. Notice again when it starts to decline, 2010. That yellow line going down, this is the age 15 to 30, not as much as the other age groups, but this is the group that's as their brain is developing. Canadian men, similar. The blue line represents 15 to 30, and they also begin to decline around 2010, reporting fewer men reporting that they have good mental health or excellent mental health. Okay, finally. Then United Kingdom, Nordic teens, and Europe. The United Kingdom, 13 to 16. The yellow, the kind of the orangish line here, representing a number of times where they've reported self-harm. This is pretty dramatic. Notice again, 2010, that big jump, moving the girls up, boys more gradual. But there's, and in this gray area, you can see that increase. Nordic teens, the same way, reporting high psychological distress. Here, you got a big jump, it's pretty dramatic, 2010, moving up with the girls and the boys also. These are the 5 countries, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, and Iceland, are the Nordic countries. And then Europe, all of Europe. High psychological stress by gender, girls again. So there's that trend of in that period, this is why he says 2010 to 2015 seems to be a critical period for Generation Z when things tend to take a turn for the worse as far as their mental health. Okay. And finally, Australians and New Zealanders, our English-speaking allies. Here, overnight hospitalizations for teens, 12 to 24. Again, we see this increase. So this is why Hyde is saying this is a concern. We need to really find out what's happening to our young people. Same with in public hospital discharges for intentional self-harm in New Zealand. We have again the girls and the boys, gradual increase, but the girls. So the girls seem to be more impacted with social media than the boys. We'll talk about why that might be. Okay. So this great rewiring of the young people's brains, Gen Z, it's connecting them to everyone in the world, while it's disconnecting them from the people around them. Look at this picture on the right-hand side. You know, how much eye contact is there with that? You know, we don't know. Maybe they might be talking, but there seems to be a withdrawal. More people on their phones than talking to each other. So, Dr. Hyde introduces something else that was happening during this time that has made this situation even worse. Starting in the 1980s, our country, along with other industrialized nations, began to move away from what he calls a play-based childhood. And that means that we got to the point that we were so overprotective of our children. There were laws passed of neglect that if a child was out alone, someone might report them for neglect. So parents began to be more protective of their children in the real world, but not as protective of their children in the virtual world, which is the internet world. So starting in the 1980s and then accelerating in the 1990s, fewer and fewer children were experiencing just a play-based childhood. They had activities like club sports, gymnastics, ballet, but not just going out and playing unsupervised with their friends. And that was important in the development of the children. So we tend to worship what he called safetyism. We got to be safe. Our playgrounds had to be safe. Everything had to be safe. I understand the concern of parents. So I'm not necessarily saying that's wrong, but Dr. Haidt said it has had a negative effect on our children. The play-based childhood of our children is so important. This unsupervised child play is important for children to learn to experience bruises, handle their emotions, take turns, resolve conflicts, and play fair. Some Norwegian researchers have said that we need for children to experience more risky play. It's hard for a parent, to kind of, that I want my child to have more broken bones. It's not something that we think about, but think about, climbing trees or doing more risky behavior that we are shielding our children from. Gradually, this has happened. So as this was going on in the 1990s, by the 2000s, we were really insulating our children, according to Dr. Haidt, at the same time that the internet was coming in to really capture our children's attention in a different way.
Christina reminds me of the doctors that say kids aren't eating enough dirt these days. Actually, doing something like eating dirt helps their immune systems to develop when they're little. And so it's good to let them get out and eat some dirt.
Right, I remember making mud pies. I didn't eat them, but I
Yeah.
remember making mud pies and that. So I'd like to turn to this article here, because I want to just read a few things from this article. Notice the date, 2008. That's 2 years before the big 2010 change. I would like you to read it, but I would like you to have your children to read it and any parents of young children to read this short article. I think it's very important. Just in the first column, the second paragraph. This improvised and imaginative play allows children to develop their own rules within which their fantasy worlds operated. These rules develop into self-regulating behavior. Further down, all the time spent playing make-believe actually helps children to develop critical cognitive skill called executive function, the ability to self-regulate. The middle column, kind of 3/4 of the way down. This apparent loss of self-regulation or poor executive function is associated with high dropout rates, drug use, and crime. And then the last sentence, the best kind of play costs nothing and really only has one main ingredient, imagination. So this is so important to allow children to do this. I remember I had a student who, she was a babysitter, and she suggested to the children well, it's good, it's a nice day outside, let's go out and play. And the children said, play what? So it's like the idea of just playing for just playing sake was foreign to them. Okay, I want to thank Ron for this picture. He's contributed some pictures to me. So thank you, Ron. This is what Dr. Haidt is talking about, this movement from the play-based childhood to the phone-based childhood. In the picture here, you have a mother, dragging her child in for dinner because he's out playing. And yet today, or in 2018, you have the parent trying to drag the child out of the house to try to get the play. And then the dinner tables of 1980 and 2025. Praying and maybe talking to each other. Many of you remember having dinner with your families. We did talk to each other. But 2025, if there's phones allowed at the dinner table, it would be very likely this picture here scenario. They would be on their phones rather than interacting with each other.
2010, was that also about the time when more women went back to work?
I think that happened before then, I think. Okay, so let's take a survey. Dr. Height did this survey, and I'm going to try it in our class. I want you to think back in your early childhood, way back in the Neolithic period. As my children remind me, think back and think of how old you were when you were allowed to play on your own, unsupervised, outside with your friends, to be able to walk several blocks to your friend's house, to go to the park, to just be outside, without any supervision, in the neighborhood somewhere. And you would come in when it was dark or when you got called home for dinner. So I want you to think about how old you were, because I'm going to ask everyone to shout it out at one time in a minute. Okay, think about that age. How old were you?
5.
Okay, ready? Call it out. 8. Okay, all right. So let's say anyone 6 and under. We're 6 and under. Oh, wow. Oh, 6 and under. Okay. How about 7?
Yeah.
Okay. 8, 9, 10 and older? Okay, we had a few. Dr. Height says that in our age group, this is the norm. 6, 7, 8, 9 is when we were allowed to be on our own. But the Gen Zs, even though there was variation, most of them were 10 to 12, the average, which says something that children were not really given that opportunity to have this free play until much later in life, the time they were developing. Okay. All right. This playground really made me nervous. But it is a playground in Dallas, Texas. There's no date, so I'm sure it may have even been before our time. Maybe some of you remember a playground like this.
Monkey bars.
Yes.
But I noticed there are no parents around. You see that? No parents. These kids are out there, these 10 feet things. I would not like that. And Dr. Height is not suggesting that we return to these type of playgrounds. But his point is that we have made many of our playgrounds too safe, and that we haven't allowed them to just play and get hurt, even though that bothers a lot of parents. Does anyone remember playing in a playground like this? Oh, really? Oh my gosh, really?
Sure.
And you survived, which is good.
Ground. Remember that whirly one that you'd get on with
Yes.
and it would throw you off? Yeah.
Yes. You notice you don't see those too much anymore because of people getting hurt and people getting sued and so forth. Yes, comment back here.
Say though, is that today there are so many lawsuits, especially in the schools.
Yeah.
If you are not protecting kids in schools, parents can take out lawsuits, even in public parks they can. So my point is, I think due to the fact that of lawsuits, if you are more conscious of making sure that things are safe.
Absolutely, and that's what.
And being the teacher,
Yeah,
Absolutely.
if our Zoomers couldn't hear, she said it's because of lawsuits that playgrounds have changed, even in parks. That schools especially don't want to get sued by parents who have kids that are injured.
Right.
And on the other hand, I had a friend who was a couple of years older than me. She was out playing on the street and she was one of the first children to be abducted off the street by a parent.
Oh,
So we, it's yin and yang a little bit here.
Absolutely, and that's why, and so that's why I'm kind of torn when he's talking about this. But maybe there's a compromise, is what I think we should have. Someone else.
So I remember you talk about the yin and yang, and it was very memorable. I was a young parent. It was in the early 1980s, 1981. I bet all of you are going to remember this. When Adam Walsh was abducted, that scared the bejesus out of me. And I think you talk about in the 80s, parents changing from allowing your kids to play outside and becoming very protective. We lived in Florida at the time. That happened in Florida. Oh my gosh, we didn't let our kids go anywhere without having them within sight. It was terrifying.
Yes, and that's a good reason why we have moved in this direction. But could there be a compromise? This is a playground in downtown Colorado Springs. No, no, blue pants. Now, this is a trend now, so I think this is a good compromise. Notice you have some adults kind of on the sideline here, but children are allowed to play and maybe they can fall, but it's more challenging than our playgrounds. So maybe the idea of presenting more challenging experiences for our children, but with a watchful eye, you know, kind of being in the background, but letting our children solve the problems for themselves. If they get into an argument with their friends, rather than running home and saying, you know, so-and-so did this to me, have them solve it, make them solve their own conflicts. That enables them to have some executive action, rather than running to their rescue and defending them or taking their side. Let them solve it and deal with it. And that's what I think Dr. Height is talking about. Okay.
Christine, do you mind 2 quick comments, Jane
Okay.
and Ron?
Okay.
Well, I was going to say, we didn't have many playgrounds, even though it was a big city in Detroit. But what we did was climb trees, play softball, mixed teams, you know, just find a field and go do that. But one day I remember I climbed up the tree, but I couldn't get down. So I called my sister, who was among the group. She was only 16 months younger than I. And I said, go get the stepladder so I can get down out of this tree, because everybody else was swinging down by their arms. And I thought, no, I'll probably fall and hit my head. But those kinds of things were the things that we did, because we didn't have playgrounds.
But then you solved the problem, you see?
Right.
You found a way to solve the problem. If no one rescued you, you found a way to solve it,
Yeah.
which is a good point. Okay.
Thank you, Jane. Ron, quick.
I was over the Willow Creek playground and I noticed that they had rubber mats out by the swing sets. So where's the fun of not being able to pull stuff out of your knees? That's part of growing up.
Yeah, that's what I know. We'll have a couple more.
Okay, let's do those 2 and then we'll move on with the slides. Yeah, go ahead.
I hear what you're saying, although ADA has changed much.
Right,
I
no,
mean, rubber mats are for handicapped folks to roll their wheelchair. So the whole play area has changed in part.
Good point. Good point. Yeah.
I wonder how much the change in the family unit structure affects how children play then versus how they play now, because when I was a very small child, the family unit was aunts and uncles and cousins, and we all lived in the same city. And now families are dispersed, so dispersed that we no longer have a larger family unit within the community. So I wonder how much that affected the way they played then versus now.
Right, and many people don't know their neighbors too. When I was growing up, we knew our neighbors and everyone kind of kept a watchful eye on the children, and that made a difference as well.
That too.
But 2 people are now working with this economy.
Mhm.
You've got both parents out of the house working, sometimes at home, but
Right,
I think that has a lot to do with it also.
that's true,
It's a different world.
that's true.
Okay, let's let Christine get through some more slides.
All right,
That's okay.
so Dr. Height identifies 4 harms of this phone-based childhood now that these children are growing up in: social deprivation, sleep deprivation, attention fragmentation, and addiction. I'm going to take them individually. Okay. Social deprivation. Okay. Teens initially thought, hey, I'm getting all these friends. I can just put all of these friends online and move them along, but they were not having the one-on-one contact with their friends. And so their mental health began to decline. You had depression, anxiety, and other disorders. In this chart here, daily average time in minutes spent with their friends. Look here at the blue line, 15 to 24, starting 2003, pretty high. Look at that dramatic decline in the number of minutes, personal minutes they were spending with their friends. Declines in other age groups too, but certainly most dramatically with these young children. And here's a point that really got to me that I think we should take a look at. while they are getting less attention maybe with their friends, it seems like they're also getting less one-on-one with their parents. Because in this study of 2014 of 6 to 12-year-olds, 62% of their children reported that their parents were often distracted when the children tried to talk to them. And what was the main reason? They were on their phones.
Yeah.
So, and I thought to myself, when I was with my grandchildren a couple of weeks ago, I was watching a movie with them and I had my phone, I was checking the news, and I thought, I am not going to do that anymore. You know, I am going to be with them 100%. So all of us need to recognize when we're with our children, when with our grandchildren, let's give them our 100% attention and not have our phones, because we too can be dragged by, you know, our attention can be dragged away with our phones. Okay, sleep deprivation. When I was in the sleep and dreams unit in psychology class, I would ask my students, how many hours of sleep did you get last night? And in a group of 30 to 35, I might have one or two say they got 7 or 8 hours. The majority said 4 or 5 hours of sleep. And I asked, why? And of course, they blamed homework at first, but then they began, as we discussed, that they began to admit that, yeah, they did their homework, but they were also on their phones. They did not want to give up that time on social media. And so they'd rather lose sleep than take that time away from their phones. And so Heid's saying that this sleep, less sleep, does have an impact on young people's brains. There's greater internalizing scores, which they mean depression, sadness, hopelessness, as well as for the boys also externalizing symptoms, which is maybe aggressiveness and loss of impulse control. So in this chart here, you see again, sleep less than 7 hours. Look how it's shooting up. And in this case, it looks like it shoots up about 2013, where these young people are getting less and less sleep. Okay. Okay, the next slide, attention fragmentation.
Well, I just got a quick question.
Okay.
I think this is not only true of our kids we're talking about, or sleep deprived. I think that's true of us. Some of us are so addicted that we're depriving ourselves of sleep.
Good point. I think that's true. I'm not gonna ask you how many hours of sleep you got last night, but think about that. That's
I was
very,
up in the middle of the night on my.
oh, okay.
Good, Carla.
So I just retired last May as the principal of an elementary school in Jeffco from 2008 to 2024. And it was amazing to watch over the years, and it's the years you're talking about, but especially the last several years. And then also since COVID too, the socialization of our kids. But every single school year, I would have families that I would talk to and about the sleep deprivation. I would have families that would tell me that they would actually lock up the devices before their kids would go to bed, but their kids would know where they were. And they would wait till the parents would get to sleep, and they would literally go and get them, and then they'd tell their friends, get on them at 12 midnight or whatever. And then they'd be awake for several hours and the parents wouldn't even know it. And so then we had these kids that were just like falling asleep on their desks. And so much of what you're saying, I would see it every year, and more so.
And some kids have burner phones, fake phones.
Oh, yeah,
That they fake out their parents with.
they're sneaky.
Okay, so this is disturbing. In one study, they indicated that one child would get 192 alerts a day. So when you think about that, and naturally they're going to check them out, because who knows who might be trying to contact them. That ends up being about one every 5 minutes in the waking hour. So this interruption, Heide is saying, the constant interruption of the constant pinging that they have to get it leaves permanent marks in this rapidly reconfiguring brains. Okay, then there's the addiction part. Now, the tech companies have really fine-tuned this and have used behavioral techniques to get the kids hooked. So the hook model, as they call it, you get the trigger. Somebody sends you a text or a video or something. Then you react, you have some response, you want to respond to it. Then, how do you get rewarded? They're using B.F. Skinner's behavioral techniques on a variable ratio schedule. Not every time, like a fixed ratio, you get rewarded, but variable ratio, maybe the first time, maybe the third time, you never know when it's going to be. Just like a slot machine, you know, look at people, how many times, hours people do the slot machine because of a variable ratio reward. So they have arranged their platforms so that young people get rewarded based on this variable ratio that it results in the strongest behavioral addiction. And then they get more invested in it. They think, well, gee, I wonder who saw my post. I wonder if there's any responses to what I said. And so then they go back and then they have an internal investment and begin to go the cycle again.
It's a surge of dopamine.
Yes, that's right.
It's a feel good.
That's right. The neurotransmitter dopamine, which is helps to feel good, that gets triggered in this addiction cycle.
What kind of rewards they're getting? Does anybody know what kind of rewards they're getting? Like, what's the reward that they get?
They're getting attention from someone else. Hey, Bo, I really like that tweet. I really like that video. They're getting response from many people they don't even know. Look at all the friends I had. Look at all the people that noticed my post. So that's the kind of reaction that they're getting.
Well, isn't it an attractive thing to be an influencer? And
Yes.
how do you get to be an influencer?
That's right. How many? Okay. Okay, let's take a look at the brain. Here, on the left-hand side, we have the brain, and the yellow and the red and orange represent the brain not fully developed. So this left, the far left is the 5-year-old brain. And by the time 5 years of age, the brain, the physical part of the brain is about 90% developed, okay? But the inside of the brain is what happens, with all the neurons going on. The young child has many more neurons than we end up as adults. We end up having about 86 billion neurons. A child may have maybe 100 billion neurons. So as you can see this progression, gradually the orange and the yellow, and notice where it is, maybe in the frontal lobe, the frontal cortex, gradually gets to turning to more blue, which is the more mature as it goes along. And during this time, and especially during the puberty age, when there is what we call pruning and also myelination. The pruning is just like in a garden where you would prune more weaker shoots so that your other shoots become stronger. That's what happens with the neurons. And why it's so important, the ones that get pruned are the ones that are not used. So this is why that play-based childhood where you're using your imagination is important. You want to prune the right neurons, but there's this pruning taking place so that the other neurons will be stronger. And then the myelination, which is the coating of the axon, which is the part of the neuron that carries the message to the next cell. And that is the coding, and that makes it stronger and more efficient for communication for the young person. And the the brain is not fully developed until mid-20s. So you can think all through this very formative time, why Dr. Haidt is saying all these, the impact of social media is interrupting this normal development of the brain, and especially the frontal lobe, which is the last to be developed. Even though these abilities are throughout the brain, they're focused on the frontal lobe. So you have judgment, impulse control, personality, problem solving, all that involved in the frontal lobe, which is the final development in the mid-20s. Okay.
Excuse me, when did that become fairly widely understood? That mid-20s was.
I don't know. I was teaching psychology for 20 years and it was back in 1997. So I don't know. Do you have a psychologist in the class?
I'm a counselor, but I know that it was like mid-20s and now they're saying 27, 28.
Because we're letting kids vote, we're letting kids drink, smoke, all that stuff. Well, before
That's true. Boys tended the
And I
brain
thought
development.
I wanted to be charitable to the people who passed those laws years ago, that maybe they didn't know. That they thought they, you know, when they left home at 18, they were like grown.
Well, and look, our servicemen who go at 18 and look at all the trauma they go through when their brain is developing. So it's a little later for boys and girls, but it's about in the mid-20s.
Time check, we've got about 12 minutes left.
Yes, okay,
Christine, you got 7 slides to go.
okay. Okay, I'll be quick here. Social media affects girls more than boys. Just a quick story about Alexis. She got an Instagram at 11, when it's supposed to be 13. It was great initially, and then after about 5 months, she drew this picture. She began to be very depressed. Some of the words here are stupid, worthless, weirdo. And throughout 8th grade and throughout her childhood, she ended up in and out of the hospital with anorexia and depression. At 21 now, she is a emergency technician, but she still has problems with eating disorders. Okay, let's look at the reasons why girls are more affected. I'll try to be quick here. First, they're more affected because of visual comparison and perfectionism. For an identity for a girl, it's for their beauty and their sex appeal. This is so important, and this is why, you know, a lot of times they want to change their appearance with AI to make themselves more attractive, and they see other people more attractive. Girls' aggression is more relational. In other words, if girls want to get angry at others, they will attack their friends. Haidt talks about a story of two girls who vied for cheerleader. One girl got it, the other didn't. The girl who didn't launched a campaign to isolate this other girl from all of her friends online. And you can imagine, you know, when you're that age, how impactful that can be. Girls more easily share their emotions. When they're depressed, they'll share it. And an interesting phenomenon here that it seems like depression can spread, you know, that when someone else is depressed, then other girls begin to say, yeah, I'm kind of depressed too. It doesn't work, unfortunately, with the on the positive. When you're really happy, that doesn't seem to spread as easily as when the depression. So there seems to be that can go through social media. And then girls are more subject to predation and harassment. Many girls like to have friends, and if they have male friends who might pose as maybe a couple years older, when really it's a 40-year-old man, they don't check. They're just happy that, hey, I've got attention from these males, and they want to try to click as many friends as they want. So they're more susceptible to this harassment. Okay, what's happening to the boys? Different story here with the boys. Starting back years before, in the 80s and 90s, industrialized nations tended to move away from factory work and move it overseas to the developing nations. That meant that the need for strength and physical dexterity was not as important because all these factory jobs were going overseas. And then we moved into the service economy, where those skills were better lent for women. Communication skills, ability to sit still and focus. So when we changed from the more service economy, that kind of left the boys out where physical dexterity was important. That kind of left them more kind of adrift. So this movement to industrialize affected the boys more than girls. Okay, so the balance of the workforce began to change in 2009. By 1982, women were just as likely to graduate from college as men. But by 2019, women earned 59% of the bachelor's degrees, men 41%. And that's also the same in higher levels in graduate school. What happened? What was going on with the men? Okay, in 2000s, they began to withdraw. They began to go and they loved to play video games. And then the smartphone came in, and they pulled the boys away from the real world, from their face-to-face, shoulder-to-shoulder contact, and into the virtual world of video game playing and the internet. Boys' rate of depression then began to rise.
They think in Korea it's affecting fertility rates too.
Interesting.
You know?
I know in Japan, there's a phenomenon where Japanese boys are retreating to their rooms and just not interacting. So there's a decline in male models also, including fathers, that might have an impact. So the virtual world consumes boys in two main ways. Video game use, and that can be exciting, but if it gets to be an addiction, it can really draw them away. And it replaces the real world exploration and adventure with their friends. And then unfortunately, 24/7 access to pornography, all kinds. And so they can satisfy their powerful evolutionary desires without having to interact one-on-one with young people. I have a friend who has two daughters who are Gen Z, and they're saying they're having trouble interacting with young men who want to talk. It's difficult for men to develop that skill because so many of them are online. So he's not saying that porn is bad necessarily, but hardcore porn is not good for the boy's sexual and romantic development for future partners. And here's a cartoon that Ron gave me. Thank you, Ron. For those who get that.
The girl says, do you mind if I strap your phone to my forehead so I can pretend you're looking at me when we talk?
And so that is really true. How frustrating it is to be with someone and then, oh, I've got to catch this. And then they spend time on their phones.
Yeah.
And that can work with females or males, but we need to be aware of that. But with boys, it seems to be a real concern. So the last chart I have is that something is happening in that normally boys would exhibit externalizing symptoms during their formative years. That means, aggressive, fighting, things like that. But now with the internet, they are also trending to the internalizing symptoms of depression, sadness, and hopelessness. So in this chart, and I know, I'm sorry you can't see it very well, but the blue line represents the boys, their externalizing symptoms. And you notice how it's decreasing with time, but their internalizing symptoms of hopelessness and sadness, like the girls, is increasing. On the other side with the girls, look at how that is shot up with internalizing behavior way up, sadness, hopelessness, self-harm, fear. Their externalizing scores have really always been, pretty level. So now both girls and boys are experiencing the sadness, the depression, the hopelessness. Okay. And the final slide here. So Generation Z is less able than any generation in history to put down roots in the real world communities populated by known individuals who will still be there a year later. But there's some good news. The good news is this: Gen Z young people drink less, they have fewer car accidents, they get fewer speeding tickets, have fewer fights, and have fewer unplanned pregnancies. Well, that's pretty good, right? Dr. Height says not so fast.
Because they don't leave the house.
When I read that, I thought, this is good. I mean, this is great. But the sharp decline is not because they're getting wiser, but because they were retreating more into the virtual world and not living as much into the real world. So the question I have, what if they're engaging less in risk-taking overall, healthy and unhealthy, and therefore learning less about how to manage risks in the real world? So I know we went through these pretty quickly. We didn't have time for all the comments. Now we can spend time. What are your comments about what you've seen here?
Norley.
I have sort of a wrinkle to add, and that is with AI. Now AI companionship is like the next step. And I don't know what the source was, but there was a teenager who killed himself because the AI companion suggested something. And yeah, so AI now is even more powerful, I think, than social media.
Yes, and that's a whole component that Jonathan Haidt did not address really, because that is another thing coming that's going to have another impact.
Gene,
Yeah, Christine, thank you so much for having a double header.
Then,
I think, in reference to supporting everything you've given us today, the movie, the documentary, more or less, that Vicky was promoting last week, Adolescence. I would encourage everybody to see that. It's on Netflix. It's a 4 episode. The reason I say that is that Stammer in Great Britain is asking all the members of parliament to see Adolescence. Denmark has used it, or some of these other Scandinavian countries, to put limits on the smartphone. So in preparation for next week, if you want a case study, it's very disturbing. It's very disturbing to watch. Be prepared. But before, even if you just see a couple of episodes, Adolescence.
let's make that an assignment.
Would you agree, Vicky?
A tentative assignment, if we can, those of Netflix, try to watch it this week. And when we talk about possible changes and measures that can be taken.
What is it called again?
Adolescence.
Adolescence, about
It's on Netflix.
13-year-old boy who's on social media too much and is accused and arrested of murder of a teenage girl.
I just wanted to share real quick, when our daughters were first and third grade, we moved to a new house. The most important thing that they had, that wanted to move, was a huge box, like a refrigerator box that they had played with at their other house. They wanted to make sure that that box that became all kinds of things as they grew older, they imagined all kinds of stuff with this box. But that was the most important thing that they wanted moved.
Speaking of that box, this year for Christmas, I have 3 grandsons. I gave them a year's family membership to Discovery Center and Discovery Center in Colorado Springs to explore. And then I gave them a big, large refrigerator box, empty refrigerator box, which they then quickly brought downstairs and made a fort out of it. So you're right, those types of things as grandparents, or nieces and nephews, be thinking about things we can do, gifts that we can give that encourage creativity, and get them out of the house and playing a little bit more.
We've got just a couple minutes left. Helen was first and then Vicky. And then, that's okay. Go ahead.
I have heard so many horror stories about video games lately and how they are ruining various generations, and it starts at 5 years old. Parents have this thought that possibly the fact that the kid's learning to do all this stuff, that he's very intelligent or she, whatever, and speaks of the child's intelligence at 5. It's ruining the kid. Video games are causing divorces in like 20-somethings, 30-year-old, younger.
Because they're spending time on the video game?
Well, yes, it's a sickness. It's an addiction, really.
They also learn to drive on video games,
Yes,
even in and out of traffic.
course.
Vicky,
I think it was last Sunday, I read in either the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, maybe you guys did, about the drop in the marriage rate. And how young women are choosing ahead of young men not to get married and to live their life single, buy homes, have children. And the men, the number is going higher of young men that want to get married and have a life, but the women is lowering about who wants to get married and start a life, and
because the boys are socially inept and
Yes.
and don't know how to talk to girls and interact to be a good husband. Yeah,
it's very interesting.
yeah, go ahead.
I think it's really unfortunate that mental health resources are being cut. Because I think this just slaps you in the face and you look around, you see it, you can't not see it. But it's too bad that those resources are being cut, because I think we need them now more than ever. And Colorado, all the states are,
That's true.
it's going
Yeah.
away, which is too bad.
Good point. Judy,
Back to March Madness.
You're saying gambling online is addictive. Yes, there was quite an article this morning on television about talking about how people are addicted to gambling.
Teens and 20-something boys
They're losing money. Some of their
losing
parents.
a lot of
That
money,
goes with video games.
like a video
Yeah,
game,
it's-
right?
So are you all suggesting the Amish are onto something?
Yes, okay, let's all throw away our iPhone. Okay,
So you can see,
Some of us never had one, still don't. I'm one of them.
so you can see the challenge that we have for next week. And if you can review these proposals, and think realistically what can be done, because, Dr. Hyde is sounding the alarm. He's saying this is causing it, and he has his critics, but he's saying this is important. We need to address it, and we need to address it now.
very good. Thank you, Christine. Good discussion. Look forward to it next week. Thanks, everybody. See you next week.